Today is the day. It's going back home. I want to go over a few things so that you're aware of little items on the truck. Don't worry, you don't have to memorize every single thing I say. I'm going to make this video private. It's only for you. I'll give you the link. Find yourself a cheap or a free downloader. Download the video on YouTube and have it for yourself so you can refer back to it. I'm going to talk fast. Some of it won't make any sense, but if you go through it a couple of times and follow your other instructions that I'll mention, you'll be just fine. The good part of this whole deal, this truck is ready to drive anywhere. Drive it across country. Once it lands, be very careful because it's not a slug. The first thing I want to do is tell you about the power steering. It has a 3-second delay, and that's designed so that when you turn the key on, the pump does not start running instantly because they don't want you to take voltage away from the ignition system. So you turn the key to the start position and you will hear the fuel pump run, which you may not be able to hear it, but I can. And now the power steering pump is running. So you have power steering without the vehicle running, which is great, but it is a heavy drain on the battery. So you just hit the key and it runs. One thing about 2018 through 21 Mustangs is that and that's basically what this is now. It's a Mustang. They have exhausts that are changed a little bit for 2021 and 22, I believe, and it's called a neighbor valve. When you first start these trucks cold, they make an enormous noise. They're very loud until the idle comes down. And it takes sometimes 60, 90 seconds based on temperature. Your truck will be loud when it's first fired up in the morning. So if you have neighbors that are gonna complain, keep it inside. Well ventilated, of course, but you don't have catalytic converters. So basically, you know, it's poison gas coming out of there, but it's gonna be loud until it warms up. I got your key made, of course, and they do work for the door. Both keys do the door and both keys do the ignition. It's a little sticky, but honestly, it's fine. They both do it, and they both fire it up. Okay, let's go over to the passenger side. I'm going to show you a couple things. Okay, I put this here because sometimes when the vehicle is not fully engaged into park, it will not start, and slamming it won't help. So really, I know it's in park, but if you're not sure, just give the truck a little push and you'll hear it click. Or if you're on a hill, release the brake and you'll hear it click. That's the transmission clicking. If that doesn't occur, it won't start. So if you jump in it and you're like, oh my gosh, why won't it start? Because it's not all the way in park. It is actually a fault of the 10R80 transmission. The Mustangs are a little more positive in their linkage. So usually it's never a problem. But I just put that there in case some idiot on a freight ship decides to keep slamming your truck into park. I want to show you about what's called the OBD2. It's an engine management link, and this is all modern cars have it, and yours needs to be accessible, but it also needs to be up under here so it doesn't hang down and look like crap. You just twist it around and there's enough wire to where you don't have to worry about hurting anything. And I want to show you what it is. It's right here. You can zip tie this stuff if you want, but you're going to be accessing this at least once a month, once every other month. So it was caught on a speaker wire. Okay, so what you have here, this is the link to your engine management system. It is engine only. It has nothing to do with any other part of the vehicle. This that's plugged into it gets data from the engine computer and translates it to the dashboard. So this is all designed by Mars Automotive, the place where you bought the engine. One of the reasons I don't use ready-to-run systems, sure, they defeated the securities and they've defeated the anti-ignition and some other things, and it will run, and it does. But what they didn't do is defeat the rest of the inputs from a Mustang. For example, when you plug a code reader into this, it thinks that it's in a Mustang, and it's got several things wrong with it. Mustangs have 4 O2 sensors. You only have 2. You only need 2 to run, and the thing runs great, it's fine. But the computer thinks that there are things missing, like wheel speed sensors, and I forget what the other code was. But the point is, this is how you access and figure out whether or not your vehicle's running right. Say you have a misfire and you're not sure what it is, plug a code reader into here and it will tell you what it is. So the way your gauges work is they read data from the computer. Some data comes from the engine, some data comes from, like, say, the oil pressure sensor that's individual. We'll get to that in a minute, but this plugs in and picks up engine data. What that means to you is, when you turn this on and the vehicle is running, there's a little red engine here. That's check engine light. And that's on because the computer is missing input. And that's the way that Mars did it. And it's also the reason I don't ever do it that way. I don't use those. I don't program ECUs. Ford Performance deletes all of those. So if this was a Ford Performance engine control kit, you would get no check engine lights because they remove the circuits that are gone with the Mustang, if you follow me. So anyways, every once in a while, once a month, you need to plug something into this, a code reader or a cell phone dongle that has an app where you can read live data to check the health of your engine. Because if you're driving around and something goes wrong, you're not going to know because your check engine light is always on. So you need to monitor your health by plugging something into this. Okay. Another thing that is important, underneath here is the penetration of all of the wires that come in, and part of the control box that Mars built has this in it. And it's difficult, but it's engine management fuses. It controls things like the fuel pump power out, and it's all things that have to do with engine management. You don't need it, but if you ever have a problem and think you have a fuse blown, it could be in this box. Now, me personally, I would secure it way up in there and make it very difficult for anyone to mess with it. But because this is new and you need to see what it is so you're aware, I left it right here. It's not going to go anywhere. In theory, you could leave it there. But for me, I'd want it secured up, zip tied to something. All right, we're going to go look at the gauge cluster next. In order to make it easier for you to understand how to set this, I'm going to show you a couple of things. Ignition, just touch the key, you don't have to hold it. Fairly low idle, so it's reasonably quiet right now. It won't be this quiet when you start it in the morning. As I pump, the brake pedal, the RPM increases because I'm taking engine vacuum away for the brake servo. But never mind that. Here's how you adjust this. Hold these down together gently. Let them go. Now we're in setup. Now you can toggle through all of the things. For example, right now, our tach is coming from the OBD2 reader that I showed you where that plug is. That's where it gets its data for the tach. That's where it gets its data for the temperature, for the volts, and for the kilometers per hour. The oil, for example, comes from a separate sensor on the engine, not the engine computer. The fuel gauge comes from the sender in the tank, not the engine computer, because obviously it's not in a Mustang anymore. So what I want to do is go over here to the fuel, hold down the button, let it go. Input. What type of input does the gauge have? Let's find out. Hold it down, let it go. Now, right now I have it set on this VDO 1080. That's resistance to ground. 10 to 180 is the range. if you scroll, if you can get that camera over here to look at this gauge, you're too close. You got to back up to out here somewhere. Can you see that gauge? Like this. You don't need to even do that. There. Yeah. Okay. So right now it's on the VDO, and the gauge itself is showing a little over a quarter. Yeah. So when you go to each different one, the reading changes. See how now it's all the way down? BIM is that module. We're not getting data from there because it's not in the Mustang anymore. Manual adjust, which you can do that. And then all of these are old GM. We're not using any of those. The one that you supposedly bought was this one, Ford 73 to 10. That's what the box said on it. But the reality is, I don't think that's what's in there because it's connected. And when we are on the VDO, that's about how much fuel is in this tank because I put it there. So my point is, don't assume that this is correct until you determine that what you put in is what you're using. Because I think Summit sent us the wrong one and I didn't really look until after I put it in. And I know when I go to the Ford one, 7310, you get no reading. And that's not right because it's hooked up. So, and there's fuel in the tank. So I believe this is the unit they sent us, but you may need to verify that yourself. And that's why I'm telling you about this. Don't just assume that you have that much fuel. You take off on a trip and run out of gas. All right. You keep going till any one of these will have a back, and you can just hold it, let go, and keep scrolling, and it'll say back. You'll be able to get out of it. Exit setup. Hold it down, let it go. Now there's your temperature, your what it's showing for fuel. Any one of these displays you can change, but your check engine light's always going to be on. I told you about that, and you know why now. Step back a little bit. Is that on?
Yeah.
This steering column is original to the truck. I had to make an adapter for the end of it to fit the power rack. In doing so, I'm going to turn the power steering pump on. There it is. In doing so, it works great. It really does. It feels fantastic. But every once in a while, you'll feel a little like thunk. I just want to make you aware of that. That's nothing to be alarmed about. All it is a U-joint that is touching itself as it goes around because the adapter that I made isn't perfectly straight. Now the reason we didn't change this is because it actually saved you several $1,000s. You need really you should have a tilt column. I don't know if you're fat, but I am, and it's very comfortable, but a tilt column would be better. You can always upgrade that later on. Everything that's here is reusable and adaptable, but personally I would have put a tilt column in it. But I just want to make you aware, if you're driving it, you feel that little thunk, you're like, oh no, what's wrong? Nothing. Don't worry about it. Oh, did we talk about the measured mile?
No.
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 Okay. All right. I'll tell them. Let me get out of the sun.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things you're going to have to do with that gauge setup is what's called a measured mile or a measured kilometer. Once you drive the truck, you want to make sure that your speedometer is accurate. And by doing that, you enter setup and it will tell you, drive a measured mile or kilometer. And when you do that, you tell it when you've started and when you've stopped. And it then calculates based on transmission revolutions what your mile per hour should be. And it does that because you told it to. So right now, the speedometer works, right? But is it accurate? I don't know. You have to take your phone with a GPS mile per hour app and see. They're all free. You can get them at the App Store. But you want to drive the truck and look at that and see if what you're seeing on the dash matches your actual speed. If it does not, you need to calibrate it by the directions in the Dakota Digital Gauge manual. Real quick on your wipers, these are your original Ford arms. You cannot buy wipers for a 74 Ford. Everyone's gonna look at you like you're speaking Greek. But what I've done is I've changed these ends to an adaptable modern style. So if you need wipers in the future, you just pop this off. I'm not gonna do it now, I don't wanna break it. You just pop this off, take it in the auto parts store, and make the kid behind the counter do his job and find you one that will work. I bring it up now because these are a little short. That's all I have. They work fine, but this is a 14 inches long. I'd like to see something like a 16 or 17 on this one, and maybe a 15 on that one, because when it's raining, the patterns don't actually collide. There's a little gap between them. But you now have wipers that you can purchase over there. We're going to talk about ride height for a second. Where this body rides, and as you put miles, 500 miles on this truck, this may change. It may drop a little more yet. The ride height is fully adjustable by turning the lock collars on the coilover springs on all four corners. These are the lock collar keys. One pair is for the front and one pair is for the rear. I don't know which. I dialed them in by hand and then they locked them down. So these are staying with the truck. You're going to need them to lock the collars once you play with the ride height. This is a 1974 Ohio license plate. Wouldn't it be cool if that made it home? I don't know where that came from. Must be original. In addition to your ride height on the coilovers, there are also small knobs. When you tighten or loosen them, it affects the way the oil travels through the body of the shock, giving you softer or more firm feel. You have to figure that out for what you're using it for and what you like. So once you get your ride height locked in where you like it, say you're bottoming out on one area of road near your house every time you drive, well, you should raise the ride height on your front and stiffen up the shock a little bit. Or if you feel like the truck's floating down the road, you're going to want to stiffen them up or loosen them up if it's like riding like a rock. The way you do that is with the QA1 adjustable shocks. I think one of the last things is this fuel system. All fuel systems on modern vehicles are pressurized. This one is not. This doesn't leak, but if you ever walk by and smell fuel, it's because this little rubber thing sucks. You might want to get a better one of those. And also on the tank itself, there's a vent that has a safety valve on it, but this vent runs up underneath the frame rail. So don't ever slide underneath it with a lit cigarette. There is an open vent to a tank. Nothing will come out of it. It's got a check valve on it. It just lets air escape, which is fumes. Directly under here, all the way down on the bottom, is the oil filter. The oil filter, I used a cheap one. Fram is the brand name. I've been using them for years. As much as I change my oil, I don't care. The filter, it's not that important to me, but on your video, people seem to cry about what I used. That's fine. You can get a better one. What you can't do is use a Mustang oil filter, because we've moved your oil filter. If you remember, there's an MWR kit that we brought from the side of your engine all the way over and mounted it remotely. So number one, it's easier to change, and number two, you can use a bigger filter. So what you want to do is get the numbers off that one, cross-reference it to a new filter. As long as the threads fit and the O-ring seal is the same size, you can use any filter you want. So when you go to buy a filter, make sure you cross-reference that Fram number and find something that works. A regular Mustang oil filter will not fit. Last thing is, this is the washer solvent bottle. It used to be over there. I moved it over here. There's nothing in it right now because that's an original bottle and the pump works. But what I didn't do is fill it full of fluid, because if that 40-something-year-old seal drips and there's a puddle underneath this truck, they won't let it on your boat. So you fill that up when you get home. If it leaks, no big deal. You can get a seal. It's just like the shape of a coin. It's not a big deal. So I think that pretty much covers it. Give me a second to catch my breath. Those are all of the little idiosyncrasies that you need to know for this vehicle. When it lands, drive it, baby it, get to know it, set that fuel gauge, set your mile per hour, and get all of that stuff wrapped around your head, setting everything up and just going easy for a while. I've shaken it down, I've driven it, it's great, it's way scary fast. It has more power than grip, but I'm very happy to have built it. For as many little things that came up, it was awesome. The whole thing was awesome. Every part I touched just was so nice, and it was just a lot of fun to build. Thank you. Let's build 10 more. Call me when it gets home.